Welcome back, subscribers. It's Monday morning. It's 7:49, April the 6th, 2026, and this is a Real ID video. And the reason why I'm doing this is because my birthday's coming up on the 22nd, and I have to renew my license anyway. And I've been holding back and not getting a Real ID for ever since it really came out. They started pushing it, gosh, maybe 10 years ago. Somewhere, maybe it's been longer than that. I would say maybe 10 years. I remember going back. At any rate, the last time I renewed it in state of North Carolina, I just did it through the internet. Like I could care less. I'm not going down to the DMV unless I absolutely have to. So I just renewed it online. So it kept the same picture. So I've had the same picture for 20 years. It's been 20 years, and I've been in the state since '97. And the only reason why you end up getting new identification is because you'd be, moving your address. Your address changes. So I've been at this current address for 23 years. So I have absolutely no reason to go in there. I have passports. So it'd be like, well, how do you fly? How are you able to do that if you don't have a Real ID? Well, I have a passport. So the passport's good for like till 2027. So I just carry the passport with me. I'm just like, I'm not going to piss around with the DMV right now. And in our state, you can make an appointment now to go in to get your license changed. So I'm like, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait until it's not necessary. I haven't needed it for any of the KYC requirements, any of that. No business requirements or anything else. So there's always some kind of a workaround, and the workaround is the passport, which is funny because the passport, when you get these identification documents, you're identified at the moment technically that you get the document. But then, like as a passport, they're good for about 10 years. And well, if the documentation changes, they just ask you like, is this your current? It's such a loose system. It's like they're putting so much pressure on identifying who you are. And I've talked about this before, and it's total BS. Everybody knows it. But like, well, what are they really trying to identify? They're trying to identify a term called nexus. They're trying to identify, they just did the same thing with beneficial ownership in businesses. They want to know that that person or that entity is doing business as this, whatever name is stated, and it's of this particular address. Okay, that needs to be locked in, and it identifies contractual obligations. So basically, if your identification or your placement of this, where you live, your nexus changes, then you're technically like perjuring yourself. Like if a police officer takes your identification, he's looking at it and be like, is this your current address? Right. And if you lie, to the police officer, like you're not supposed to do that. So it's the same thing. Like they're trying to keep you up to date and compliant with current, like where can we find you so that we can, push our administration crap on you. So anyway, I've been outside of that loop. I'm like, I'm just not gonna fucking piss around with it. I don't have any real reason to do it. Again, like I haven't had any friction. Nobody's ever questioned me. Like never said, oh, you need to get a Real ID or any other business. So I was just waiting. I was like, I'll just wait till I, have to do it, and then I'll go in there and do it. So anyway, today's the day. So it's Monday morning. I roll up. And I was like, I'll just go early. I did make an appointment. I was like, I'll just go early. I already heard stories that, there's, a line and shit like that. I was like, well, I'll just go like an hour early. That should do it. Office opens at 8 o'clock. I roll in at about 10 after 7, and it's like a soup line. It's like shit. So I'm sitting at the intersection. It's in a part of our town. So the town that I live in is Fuquay Varina. Fuquay Varina it does not sound like it says. It's like many other towns that are in the state of North Carolina that they it's not the way they spell it and the way they say it, two different things. So anyway, I'm in this little town, and I'm in the old part, and the DMV office is like the town hasn't grown exponentially over the past 15, 20 years. It's tiny. It's a tiny little town. I think total seating capacity inside of it, it holds maybe 30 people. Maybe there's 30 chairs inside of it. It's a ridiculous thing. And statewide, the governor Josh Stein has there's been all kinds of backlash and pushback because you're supposed to get these real IDs, but you can't get in the freaking office to get done. Again, it's just like one of these other mechanisms to kind of jerk everybody around. So anyway, I'm like, well, shit on this. I'm not going to go wait in line today. The hell with this. I'll either go tomorrow or so I just anyway, I was just kind of letting it stew. I came back to the house, pulled in the driveway, and I looked up, an appointment. So it pops up I'm looking up other offices, and it says I make an appointment. I was like, oh, well, I'll just see if there's another office I can just make an appointment at. And I find one to the town that's south of me, Lillington, North Carolina. So it's kind of north of Fayetteville, south of me. It's probably north of Fayetteville, maybe 45 minutes, maybe 45 minutes north of Fayetteville. And so it's not super far away for me. And I was like, well, I'll just, that one's available. I just need to get this identification. Let's just go ahead and do that because I can go anywhere statewide. 8:45. I have to go next Monday on the 13th. I was like, I'm there. Let's just do that. I'm going to do that. Get the email confirmation. Got all my documentation. I'm good to go. So I've got the rest of the day off. It's great. So it's like, oh well, I guess I'll do some videos today because I got a lot of stuff I need to talk about. And the identification thing, since it's like coming around again, for me, identifications like are a really huge part of this new system. And you can make a decision that you don't want to be, following along with it and not become compliant, but that will make it so that you can't rent a car. You can't. Now, I just rented a car when I was out in San Diego. We just took a trip out west, and actually rented two cars, one for a couple of days, and then one to drive back. Uh, so what they didn't say anything about the real identification. They didn't ask for a passport or any of that. But that will soon become a reality where it will become the more it keeps permeating in that it's real identification that the uh, yeah, they're going to just keep pushing it. So anyway, it definitely happens on airline flights. Um, Definitely with KYC, that's going to be another issue. So when they decide to roll it out, like it has to be like a line in the sand where this has to happen. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. Like, say I was, say if it's 10 years to get a real identification, maybe they put some kind of a line in the sand, or you're just going to end up getting a pushback from. If you don't do it, you end up getting a pushback. If you hold out like me, you're going to eventually get some kind of a pushback where you're not going to be able to do business. It's as simple as that. They're just going to be like, well, we need to have real identification or other forms of identification to it. So, what does that mean? Restricted travel, potentially doing business with could be insurance companies. It's going to be this whole trickle down. So it's going to be, on the state level administration is really what's enforcing it the first go around, and then of course FAA, and then it's going to be kind of like again this trickle down effect that's going to happen, and ultimately it's like people that are holding out and not doing it, maybe because they don't want to be part of the new system or whatever else. Eventually, you're going to have to upgrade your driver's license if you're not going to drive. You don't necessarily have to, but you'd still have to have identification. Be like, I don't need any identification. Be like, okay, well, yeah, you could do that, but then next thing is going to be like, well, how are you going to bank? The banks are also requiring this. They need identification. I've talked about this. I rented a piece of equipment from a local rental place at a Home Depot, and just a tool, and I had to KYC. So it's going to be in everything. Now, is it bad? Is it a bad thing? Be like, no. It's part of the digital system that they're trying to identify that people. It's funny, like when I look at this comparable to the old way, I was like, well, how did I get my license when I was 16? Did I have to show any identification? No, we didn't have to show anything. You just gave uh, your current address, and I can remember it distinctly. But we didn't need any of that. Didn't need any. Didn't need a power bill. Didn't need any of that stuff. And then when my son just went through this. So the last one in my family that we've had to, get licensed and ID'd was my son, who's he's 19 now. And I was like, well, how the hell are we going to be able to identify him, because he doesn't have a power bill, he doesn't have a phone, he has no obligations. Like, how in the hell can we do this? Well, it's a birth certificate, it's a social security card, it's that, the old, documentation. And I'm like, well, and I remember asking, I was like, well, how does that identify where a person resides? That doesn't do that. Well, you're the guardian and you're the one that has to stay. I was like, well, but I like, I don't, whoever came up with this system, it doesn't make any sense at all. But unless you know about the new digital system and how everything is going to be interlinked and tracked and traced, and I'm not into it, guys. I'm totally not into it. Um, but ultimately, it's like, well, what are they tracking and tracing? Be like, okay, let's get past that point where I'm just going to be, balling up my fists and getting all angry and acting like a 2-year-old. So what are they tracking and tracing? Like, what's so important that I'm doing that you need to be keeping an eye on me? So I kind of get this micromanagement type of vibe. If you're inside of an environment where you got it and you've been doing what you're supposed to be doing, whether that's at work, maybe it's with whatever it is that you're doing in your world, and no one's really checking up on you that you're doing what you say you're supposed to be doing. If they are, then it's micromanagement, and it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, it's none of your business. It's my privacy. This is what comes up whenever you start talking digital identification and tracking and tracing. So, what are you looking for? Because if whatever you're looking for, I'm going to make it so that you can't find it, because it's private, my private information. And if you just kind of pull back a little bit and you look at it and say, like, well, if I had my identification the old way, where you weren't supposedly, it wasn't connected to any digital anything, got my driver's license, what's it connected to? Not much of anything, really, right? So it gives this illusion like you have privacy, right? Which I'd say, like, comparable potentially to the new system, yes. But then I said, like, all right, but let me just invert that and say, like, okay, now I have a real true identification, so they say, which it's all the same shit. Uh, how am I losing my privacy? That would be the next question. So the old system would be more private. The new system is being argued that it's less private. I was like, say, I have my identification and I'm just sitting out on my back deck and I'm having a personal conversation. No telephones around me, nothing. And be like, well, that's about as private as it gets. Um, there is no privacy violation. Just because they would have digital identification, if you're not really doing anything, which most human beings are not doing anything. They're not. Regular human realities are really not that exciting. That's why they have us satiated with movies and music and so on and so on in the United States. Is that there's not really much that's going on, so you have to keep everybody active and interested in something so that they can stay away from getting in misbehaviored environments. But again, the identification is being earmarked as being, it's violating your privacy. And I was like, the actual identification isn't. That's not the thing to be focusing on. The thing to be focusing on are all of the necessary things that you're doing. That is, so the identification is just kind of like it allows you to be in a tracked and traced environment, because when you have the identification, then it's like, okay, now I need to have insurance, or now I want to rent a car, now I want to go on an airline flight, whatever it is. And it's all going to be kind of interlinked and traced, and be like, well, that's exactly what we're talking about. And being like, well, guys, that stuff is tracked and traced anyway. It's already been there, right? If anybody's ever been audited by the IRS, they can see anything. If you had the FBI that was up your ass, or whatever government agency really wanted to find out about you, they know everything about you. It's like just absolutely no secrets. So again, it's like, well, why do they need to have the digital identification then? Oh, that's a really good question. What they're trying to do is establish a. This is from the way we understand it. Is the way they're trying to establish a baseline for uh, having a couple more things available or necessary in order to be able to get the identification. So again, it proves nexus that you're actually really there. So again, all the stuff that's going on right now with illegal aliens, space aliens. Okay, what does that mean? That they don't really have any nexus. Okay, so if somebody comes from the Pleiades or they're Arcturian or whatever, Zeta Reticuli. I don't, it doesn't matter. Or they come from El Salvador, or now I'm not saying it's all the same, but again, it's the same type of language. Uh, Wherever, Panama, Chile, I don't care. Where are you from? China, East Jabip, makes no difference. It's still the same thing that they don't have a nexus. They're not actually like, they're not doing business here. All right, what's your business? What's your state of business? Be like, well, so if you got pulled over and somebody or asking like, well, what's your business in this location? And you say like, well, I'm here because I'm a salesman and I'm going door to door, or I'm a whatever you have a reason to be there, right? You're there because of business and money, you know, trade. Uh, you're you know you're facilitating growth of the system, right? You're not acting against it. You're not there like you're not supposed to be there. So whenever this happens, okay, when you're born in the United States, you have a birth certificate, all right? And that birth certificate it's ledgered so that whenever it comes time that's directly related to Social Security. And all of these documents are interrelated to the International Bank of Settlements. So essentially, and that's how our money system basically runs behind the scenes. So I'm not going to go into length on this because this video would be a lot more lengthy. So this is just really about kind of how to shape and wrap your head around like what's going on. And it's like I'm trying to tell you just to kind of get over it, unless you're going to go live in the woods. All right, that's your own accord. You can do that. But the greater element of what they're going to be tracking once you have nexus and prove that you're from that area. And if you're not, you're an alien. Uh, you're just not legal because you're not necessarily compliant with having nexus yet inside that space. And there's administrative rules behind trying to establish they kind of got you. Like if you don't have a power bill, you don't have a cell phone, you don't have this. Now in the old system, you could get around that. I had plenty of people that worked for me that kind of crossed my path. I didn't technically have any illegal people working for me in any of my companies, but I had subcontractors that had them. All right. And I just wouldn't ask any questions. This is because it's none of my business. That's his business or her business. It's not my business. All right. So then I would pay the contractor and then I'm off the hook. But there were many projects that we did that I could, that I remember asking one time because I didn't really know how it worked because I wasn't from the South. So we didn't have any immigrant labor where I was from, where I grew up. So I asked those questions. And he said, well, they just come up with a fake Social Security number, and then we go ahead and just write them a check. And I said, so, and that's it. Now that's one form. And he said, and if it comes back from my accountant that account number, if that Social Security number isn't right, that they need another one, he'll go tell the guy, and the guy will come back with another Social Security card number. That's one form of it. Another way, like I've had guys work for me that have working papers. So if you went down and got an identification in the old system, I guess you can still do it technically if you have if the utility provider, a cell phone provider, something that has a bill that comes to a specific address. As soon as you lay your head down on a specific address, you could use that as your physical address. So then you could send your mail to that location as long as it has your name on it with the identification of the address. You could go down and get identification. you could get a driver's license, and that was the workaround. And I'm like, so you can just go get a driver's license and you're not an American citizen? And they're like, well, yeah, absolutely, totally. I was like, what? So I had plenty of guys that worked for me that had working papers that they just did the proper documentation, and they'd have to do it every 2 years and get working papers. But if they did anything that was not above board, they got in trouble with the law or so on, and then they could ultimately become deported. But anyway, the system was already established to be able to have these uh, gray areas where people could be technically not a U.S. citizen and still have identification, get paid, pump money back into the system, and that was how the whole thing worked, right? So now they're putting more stringency on true identification, and then essentially just drawing this line in the sand that this is nexus at this moment in time, at this date, and they're creating this. I've talked about this. They are creating this essential snapshot and saying, like, okay, from this point forward, let's just say the United States has XYZ people that are compliant. We're working towards getting them compliant. And this is a whole international plan. This is not just the US that's enforcing this. This is all the digital societies that are all going to be running on these digital systems and blockchains. So um, it's it's coming, but again, it's happening at a slow kind of bleed until you actually really need it. Like me, I have to get my license, I have to get the thing changed just because it's expiring, and I have to have a current ID. But where it's going to get you is on the backside through being able to track and trace through the digital identification that every time it's scanned. Okay, and if you haven't had this happen yet, they're not doing it really in North Carolina that I've seen. But like for example, if you buy alcohol, when we were in Virginia, just buying a drink at a bar, they've got a scanner and they scan the back of the card because there's a QR code on the back of the card, just to confirm your ID. And again, it's like supposedly to confirm your ID, your identification. But what that's going to do is just go into another database. So all these data centers that are going in. So every single time that you do something and it in your identification can be used, it'll be either be from your plastic identification, your driver's license, or it's going to be every single time that you click on your phone. And so I think people are thinking that it has to do, digital ID is the driver's license, but it's already been happening through the telephones, which is funny because the only reason why they haven't just used the phone as the digital identification is because it's a state issue with the driver's license. They're trying to make it seem like maybe to not have you pay close attention to the phones and what the phones actually, how they can track and trace you with the phones. It's anything and everything that you ever do and look at. It's how long, if you're scrolling through social media sites, it's how long you stay on one particular image or any site that you go on and click. Every time that you click on something, it's a transaction, and that means that you like it. All right. And that ultimately is going to identify things that the algorithms are going to be allowing you to see. So uh, it's a permission based element. So we've looked at this and saying, like, all right, you've already seen this. Like if somebody says, hey, can you look up XYZ? And I would say, no, I'm not going to look up that shit because it's going to jack up my algorithm. All right. And I think you're going to see more and more and more of this type of behavior when people start becoming more and more aware of it. And ultimately, the things that are very fringy, um, people are just not going to go to it because there's going to be an impactful, social score on this. And that's something that it's going to be interrelated to availability of things for you. And so again, like we're looking at workarounds. Be like, so what's the workaround? Be like, if I want to look at something, I have the freedom to be able to go look. Sure, you could go look at it, but somebody might look at you as being a risk. Like if you're somebody that, so as I've been told, that the things that they're really concerned about are things like, well, they're doing it now, like digital forensics. They've been doing this for years, where if somebody is involved or somehow directly associated with crime, that they can go back and digitally forensically go back and look at their phone and all of the things that they've looked at, all right, and anything that they go back and look at the metadata. And that metadata is not just for those items that are, you know, detrimental to society or maybe that are associated with that crime. And that's really what the main driver is of the way that they've sold it. But there's a lot of people that are inside of the fringe space that they want to know like real information, real inside truth or information. And some of the people, many of them, they kind of cross a line and they talk about things that they probably shouldn't be talking about. So they started cleansing the internet back in 2016. They started kind of cleaning things out. And a lot of the information that I had gotten my hands on from doing research was pre-2016, before they did the purge, if you will. And then they did it again on the next election. So they just made it more, they like buried things. It's in the internet. They don't necessarily like take it all out of the internet so you can't see it. They just bury it to make it really difficult to find. So that's why we're using this platform at Reservoir, because I'm like, well, screw this shit. We're not going to do this. I actually was throwing this around with a couple of people, and then also ran it through Claude. And I say, hey, this is the way that we're setting things up, because we have a knowledge that from inside sources that are telling us that in order to be able to have a protected environment, to be able to allow real true freedom of speech and freedom of thought, is that you have to have a transaction that's in between you and the internet, the public space. You have to have that space. And I've been rambling 26 minutes. So anyway, and Claude agreed with me wholeheartedly. He's like, you're exactly right. He said that if you have a transaction between public space, it allows for business to happen so that people can come into the space and trade ideas and open-minded space, right? Where it's not for the public. It's not for everybody. And that's what we're establishing here. So they can, so essentially, like, have your digital ID. That's kind of our perspective with this. Have your digital ID, track and trace this shit out of my personal. I could care less. I'm going to run like 98% or plus of everything that I do is going to run through a company. It's going to go through a trust or a company, because then it's not me. Okay. If I have a company telephone, do you know who's looking at the internet? The company representative. It's not my personal name. So the transaction, if I use AT&T, T-Mobile, Mint Mobile, whatever you use, Verizon, if you have a telephone that has a company identification to it, the company then is liable. All right. And I've talked about this before. So if you're going to be doing anything that is like questionable, do it through the company. Do it through the company. Somebody had said something about the inoculations, you know, that, oh, there's going to be another event, another pandemic. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. Be like, well, if you don't get them, you're not going to be able to travel. I'm like, horse shit. I said, I guarantee it. I said, if I'm running it through, if I buy a plane ticket through my company, I was like, it can't ask me if the person has been compliant with this. I said, I highly doubt that's going to be happening because again, it separates. If you add a third party in, especially a dead entity third party, they don't have any way to ask a company if the company has been inoculated, because I don't care if it's Microsoft. If somebody from Microsoft buys an airline ticket, they'd be like, is Microsoft, you mean the entity of Microsoft, is it compliant with the health rules? And be like, it can't be. It's impossible because it's not a real person. Okay. So I want you to start thinking about the personal space and then migrating into a kind of like a ghosted space, become like you're the corporation. That's the safety zone. All right. That's the thinking. Be like, you're the corporation. So start migrating and do what's, strip your identity out of the personal. Still have the personal, okay? You're still doing things like, but everything that you're doing, it's like you're keeping all the good stuff in the personal name so that your personal persona is all pristine and beautiful and everything's great. But behind the scenes, be like you have a corporation or a trust that you can anonymously interact inside of. Now, one of the key elements to this is that it I know this from the old system. And the old system was that if it's multi-owner, now if you just have an LLC in your name, all right, it's just you, sole proprietor, only one person. Always they've been able to do something what's called pierce the veil, which means it's like, no, we know what you're doing. All right, you just because it's a corporation and you own it, we're coming after you, and that's absolute. Just look it up, pierce the veil, look it up. And I tell a personal story on how I learned that. But at any rate, that's another story for another time. Um, do it have to be a multi-ownered environment? If it's multi-ownered, then just two people, just could be you, a friend, whatever else. Open up a corporation that has multiple people in it, and then that way that it will keep you out of that harm's way type of space. All right, because as this continues to keep ramping up, you basically have already stepped in a huge pile of shit. All right, because of the phones. They're tracking and tracing all of the data that's been on the phones. It's been, I don't know, the past uh, even if you just go back 10 years. So anything that you have posted on social media or clicked on or anything in 10 years is going to be potentially affecting you in what is available to you, your access point, right? You become your own gatekeeper based upon your previous activity and your future activity. Okay. So meaning that things just won't, when I say they're not available to you, they're not just going to come like knocking your door and take it from you. They're just literally not available you can't find it. Somebody will say something like, oh, you should go buy XYZ. All right. And you're like, okay, well, what's the website? You'd have to type the URL. If you do the search, it won't become evident for you. You're basically not going to stumble into it. All right. You're still going to have access to direct word of mouth. Type in this website to be able to go directly to the website. All right. But if it's in the advertising world where you just put in a search and just try to find something that will help you out, it just will so happen that you won't have access to those things. Right. It'll be buried because of your algorithmic placement, if you will. And that's where networking is really important because if you know somebody directly and they have the same kind of frame of mind, you can pull your resources together. And what they've created over the past, it's been happening for probably the past 10 or 15 years. Once the phones started really ramping up, is that there's been this compression of people that are just getting more self-absorbed, and they don't commune with people, right? There's no concerts anymore, big rock concerts type of things, like it was back in the 70s and 80s. There's no big social events. Like people just don't go out like they used to. Beer sales are way down. I talked to a guy young guy that was in college, and he was in a fraternity, and they were having a hard time getting pledges. And I said, well, shit. I'm like, just get a keg and get a truck and just drive around and get guys, you know. And he's like, we knock on doors and people won't even answer their doors in the door. And I was like, "Are you shitting me?" I was like, "How do they expect you to meet girls and stuff?" He's like, "I don't know. Nobody wants to talk, and nobody wants to get together." So again, this is a major it's a problem for the ones that don't want to move forward. But for those that do want to move forward and are like, "Okay, I know the rules. I'm going to be moving towards this, but I'm going to be separating it. I don't like the way what you're doing. I still want to have my space. My privacy is going to be over here in under the corporate umbrella. You can have your bullshit over here, like you fucking own me, whatever else. But I'm going to do this shit over here. I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with it because I can't stop it. I know I can't stop it. So I'm like, all right, I'll just play by the rules. I'm like, let's do that. So I said, but I told this guy, I said, you know what? I said, but that just means there's more girls for you. And he's like, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So for you as an investor and somebody moving forward and saying like, and the system is creating these speed bumps, be like, well, that's for everybody else. Be like, that's great. So that means that now like there's going to be less people inside of these environments, which will make it easier for you to be able to do the things that you want to do. Last thing that we noticed, whenever it was like post COVID, and we had this trip that was scheduled. We were going out to Colorado, We go out usually like once a year, either to Utah or Colorado, and take a trip out there. And there's nobody. We were at Chicago O'Hare, and there's nobody there. It was like my own private, you know, airline terminal. And it was nuts. But again, it was like pandemic, right? But there wasn't anybody there, and it was just easy to navigate around. The flight was open, and I could just do it. We were just wide open to do whatever we wanted. And I was like, and I remember telling Franklin this internally. I said, I said I was looking at it differently. I said, and that's when it really struck me. I said, if they fear the shit out of everybody, and everybody's too afraid to leave their houses, then the people that are willing to move forward and get into the new system and play the game, uh, the sky's the limit. The world will be their oyster. I said, absolutely, because all those other people that don't really belong in the space aren't going to be there because they don't want to play the game. They don't want to play the new administrative rule game, whatever. Same thing happened. My son and I took a trip during COVID. I had to go up north and visit my mother, and it's typically like a 13-hour drive. And we took my M3, and we made it in just under 9 hours. I think it was 8.5 hours. There were no police on the road. So yeah, we really stretched out the M3. It was a really fun trip, very exciting drive. Very under control, but just not a soul on the road. No police, nobody on the roads, and it was like it was my road. Like, hey, thanks, it's great. Um, so anyway, you'll see more of this and more people complaining about it, but the system is not set up for you just to have everybody else take for it. And there isn't going to be a savior that comes in and fixes this. It's not going to happen. You are going to be the one that steps up, and then you make the decision if you want to play the game. And if you play the game, play it smart, and then limit your liability. Talk to you later. Cheers.